Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world, and welcome to today's FIDIC webinar, Accelerating Impact, Driving Change Through the FIDIC Climate Change Charter. My name's Tony Barry and I'm the President of FIDIC. Today's event has been organised by the FIDIC Sustainable Development Committee. This committee was set up to improve the effectiveness of FIDIC's work on the impact of construction industry on sustainability and to advise the consulting engineering industry to develop strategies, tools and training to maximise its contribution to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Committee is playing a key role in promoting the positive contribution and impact of the industry on sustainable development and combating climate change. Our webinar today is part of the FIDIC's 2022 series of events, which we organise to keep our industry updated and informed on key issues we all face. Some of those events are on your screen now. And arguably, there's no more important issues than the challenges climate change presents, which is crucially must be addressed as they threaten the very future of our society and the planet itself. Engineers who design and deliver the world's infrastructure and the built environment have a key strategic role in ensuring the world tackles climate change and achieves net zero by 2050. And they play a vital leadership role in helping our governments and communities tackle this complex challenge. That's why in November last year, FIDIC launched its Climate Change Charter that sets out specific actions to be taken by individual engineers, companies, member associations and project owners, and called on the engineering, construction and infrastructure industry to step up and commit to the Charter. Today's webinar will review the progress made to date since the launch of the Charter and examine how the industry is addressing the issues of sustainability, resilience, adaptation, net zero, and how these efforts are contributing to the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers, all experts in their field, who will share their knowledge and their insights with us on the key issues around climate change and, crucially, what we'll need to do to address it. As I said earlier, the engineering and construction industry has a pivotal role in addressing climate change, and it is timely given that COP27 climate conference in Egypt is just a month away, and absolutely right that we should be discussing these important issues at this webinar. There's hardly a country in the world now that does not take this issue seriously, and all governments are looking to take action at speed to ensure their economies are net zero compliant. Our speakers will give an update of FIDIC's Climate Change Charter and also offer an international perspective on how our industry is addressing climate change and working with partners and what the next generation of consulting engineering professionals see as the most important changes, challenges and future trends impacting the industry. I'd now like to introduce to you the chair of today's webinar, the Managing Director of Oricon New Zealand and Chair of FIDIC's Sustainable Development Committee, Tracy Ryan. I know that sustainability is central to Tracy and Oricon's work, and I'm looking forward to her chairing today's event. Tracy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and welcome everybody to this series which Tony's just talked about. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Tracy Ryan and I'm chair of the Sustainable Development Committee for FIDIC. And I see I've just adopted a new country in Australia on the screen. I'm from New Zealand, Aotearoa, and it is well in the evening here. But love my Australian colleagues across the Tasman. Look, like Tony's alluded to, you know, the United Nations has named this our decade of action towards achieving sustainable solutions to some of the world's largest challenges. And I think we will all agree that recent events happening right across the world, record high temperatures, record droughts, and devastating floods, to name a few, we're all on notice that climate change is not just something that will happen in the future, that is here right here and now. And the need for action has never been more urgent. As Tony said, more than 70 countries have set net zero targets covering about 76% of global emissions. My home country, Aotearoa, New Zealand, is one of the growing number of that have enshrined the net zero target into legislation. But although pledges have been made around the world, current commitments fall short of what is needed. And we know we need bold and immediate steps towards reducing emissions now. Collaboration is strength. So as a global infrastructure community, we know we need to work more effectively to be more innovative, to share ideas and accelerate actions towards net zero. And this is why an opportunity to come together in a forum like this and a conversation like this is so important, and hence the panelists today, which represent many of our members and communities around the world. An estimated 60% of global carbon emissions come from building and operation of infrastructure, with a staggering 7% of global carbon emissions coming from concrete alone. And Sudhir might touch on that. We're in a green room before, and it was something that Sudhir was talking about. If we are to come anywhere close to achieving net zero by 2050, the construction and engineering community must play a crucial and immediate role. And that's why, as Tony talked about last year, you may recall that FIDIC published its first climate change charter, a call to action for the construction and engineering community to take immediate steps to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and to support the transition to net zero. The climate charter sets out in basic terms how the construction and engineering community should address climate mitigation and engineer the resilience of the built environment in the decades to come. The purpose of the charter is to align the global FIDIC community around the world around a number of ambitious aspirations and commitments to mitigate climate change and put consulting engineering at the forefront of global innovation in technical and behavior solutions. The climate change charter goals are to reduce emissions related to member operations across the industry, reduce embedded and operational carbon emissions in infrastructure projects of which engineers consult, design and deliver, and support climate change adaptation through mitigation and design of disaster or event resilient infrastructure. We know reaching net zero emissions will require a transformation of a global economy. Realizing a net zero economy is a huge task, requiring the creation of an enormous amount of new assets and the transition of legacy assets. Everybody has a role to play, but the expertise and mindset of consultant engineers and scientists will be imperative. Engineers' understanding of existing processes and systems and our ability to develop out-of-the-box solutions have never been in greater demand. The scale and speed of change needed requires us to leverage every tool available to us. Maximizing use of technology will be crucial, whether it is leveraging AI to improve efficiency and reduce emissions, new manufacturing techniques to decarbonize existing infrastructure and turn waste into useful resource, or new processes for carbon capture and storage. Technology will help organizations reduce risk and cost and make more informed decisions around their transition journey. As a consultant industry, we know we face challenges, the need to address a long-standing global infrastructure deficit and invest in large assets such as public transport systems to reduce future emissions, while understanding the creation of these assets is by nature carbon intensive. Assessing and understanding the impacts of design decisions at the whole of life carbon is important. And even here in New Zealand, we're benefiting from increasing engagement with Māori and the opportunity to learn from Manataraonga Māori, their traditional knowledge in ways that projects are shaped, driving new innovations that support better environmental outcomes for our people. Bringing science and the traditional knowledge together can help us create enduring assets that support and enhance the environment. Reducing emissions requires fundamental change to the way we live and do business. It also requires belief in not the yet seen, making investment and taking action well before the benefits of these are visible. And to do this requires visionary leaders and leadership. When times are challenging, leaders must continue to inspire and instill the positivity that we can make a difference, even when it seems that our world is in a state of flux. So as with that, I'm really pleased to be joined by very passionate and very visionary leaders and people that live their purpose every day in our business, who are going to share their perspectives of the world, drawing from their experiences and what they're seeing, and highlighting the role of our community and how we are living the values of our climate charter and collectively addresses issues and sustainability and climate change. So we have about 60 minutes, I believe, together for a very stimulating panel conversation. Please, I do encourage you, we'd like this to be very informative and feeding off the questions come through. So please use your chat, the chat function to put any questions, which I'll put to the team. I think the format will be that each of the team will, which of the panelists will have an opening remark. But we also do have some polling questions as well, because we'd like to kind of get your views and opinion on that. And you will see a first polling question on the screen. So if I may invite you, please, to respond to that. So in your role, how confident are you in addressing climate mitigation, transition, and adaptation through the work you do? And you will see a couple of choices there in relation to that. So if you could please go and put your selection in that. So there's interested, we do not know where to start. Proactively involved inside and outside of work, proactively involved as part of your job, required as your job, or none at all. A very broad brush of selections. And this will help us just get a bit of interest in relation to where we all are. That's interest quite kind of generic. Interest, we don't know where to start, about 41%, practically inside and probably that, okay. And none. All right, that's very helpful. I think we're going to, so I have actually asked the panelists for each of them to open the remarks about how do engineers and consultants fit into the climate change picture. So they will each open with some remarks and then we'll go into a Q&A and conversation. So please do feel that you have a voice to contribute and ask some questions, and I'll put that to the team. So I think, Jessica, we will go to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tracy. Greetings, everyone. Thanks for that introduction. Tracy, I'm the Vice Chair of the FIDIC Future Leaders Council and a member of the SDC. So it's really exciting to be here to share some insights on some of the work that I've done, but also what we're doing as the Future Leaders Council with regard to the Climate Change Charter. I'm a principal engineer in the water consultancy division at Mott MacDonald, where my focus is largely on water and wastewater resilience projects in the UK. But with the majority of my experience gained in South Africa and in living in a part of the country that's coastal, where also water and energy is scarce, it's never been more apparent the key role that we play, not just as individual citizens, but more especially as professionals in the built environment. So we're responsible not just for planning and building the world around us, but also making decisions for the built form and the natural systems that are ever evolving. So how we fit into the bigger climate change picture is a lot more complex than we initially thought. We leave a footprint, not just as individuals, but also in the impact of our work as it's amplified through the years. So essentially, we are legacy builders, and that puts us front and center of the climate change conversation, which makes the commitments that we make in the FIDIC Climate Charter come to life. So that's really the way that I see our role as engineering practitioners in this conversation. So I'll leave it there, Tracy.
Oh, thank you, Jessica, and really some open remarks. Maybe, Robert, I'll go to you next, maybe just picking up on some of the things from Jessica, because I know, this time last year, you were heavily involved with the development of the Charter and played a key role behind that, and ultimately attended COP26, and then, the evolution of us kind of 12 months on from there. It'd be great, Robert, to give your perspective over the last 12 months.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Yeah, no, it's been an inspiring 12 months for me, just to see how much the engineering community around the world has taken a real grip on our responsibilities. I think Jessica put it very well. We're legacy builders, and funnily enough, AECOM's own ESG strategy is known as Sustainable Legacies, and that's recognizes the impact that we all make, enabling infrastructure and buildings and other key infrastructure connecting systems for our cities and communities around the world. So what I've noticed, Tracy, is I was actually taking some time to scan through signatories and interest in the Charter over the last few days. And what struck me is actually the number of individual engineers from around the world who've signed up to the Climate Change Charter. And that's really inspiring, because for me, I think the journey begins as an individual engineer. How much ambition you talked about, people on this call living their values, living their purpose. And I think so many of our engineers around the world realize now the impact they can make. In fact, it came through in that poll that you just conducted. The vast majority that I could see on there were individual engineers committed, want to do something, but not sure where to start. And I think that's a challenge. So if you take, for example, a company like AECOM, where we have a significant impact because we're a global engineering consultancy, we've got about 15,000 engineers in practice across the business at any one time, working on upwards of 20,000 projects. And now what we're asking our engineering community to think about is we've got to all learn this carbon language, haven't we? Because effectively, with any of our engineering design communities in all our peer groups and companies around the business, small to large, the biggest impact that we will create designing and enabling infrastructure is those designs. And so that point to me resonated. Where do I start? And I think the next iteration of the work around the climate charter must be that focus on that technical guidance in order to help our engineering brothers and sisters get to grips with where they can make an impact in the design process. And so I think that's a process that looks at the full life cycle of the design, because many of our engineers will be engaged at different processes. They might be involved in construction on site, work supervision, management of an infrastructure project on site, and there's loads of things that can be done there. Equally, they might be involved right up in the planning, feasibility, optioneering stage. So I think probably the first thing we need to think about as individual engineers is, where can I make my impact? And the charter actually stimulates a few questions around that, looking at, can I enhance the brief from the client? Can I look at the scope? Can I be confident as an engineer in my determination to make an impact on decarbonizing these assets and engineering structures that we create? How can I voice my concerns? How can my manager and my peer group and my team support me in coming up with innovative solutions? And where can I go to for guidance? And I think there is a huge amount of work being done at the moment on trying to map out what are some of those pathways. How do you decarbonize a bridge design? How do you decarbonize an airport runway pavement? How do you decarbonize a rail track? We're starting to build up a body across our companies and enterprises and institutions of good examples of how to do this. Actually, a knowledge library is building up. And if you ask any of our peer companies, I'm sure all of us are doing that hard work to actually build up what is that knowledge library? How do you decarbonize these engineering assets? So I think FIDIC, as we go into 2023 and 24, we'll play an active role in, I think, partly signposting. Of course, we're a thin organization at a global level, but we do have a lot of influence, so we can convene, we can bring together. And I think that's what a lot of we'll be doing over the coming months. But I think it's also that empowerment, giving the individual engineers the sense that they can make a difference, they can have a voice, and they can get started. There's lots of good guidance out there to begin with. So I think that they would be my opening thoughts on this. It's a huge challenge, but equally, there's a lot of people rallying around to try and make some sense of that, including on materials, on circular economy, as you mentioned, on nature-based solutions, all forms of systematic approaches to decarbonize our engineering processes.
Fantastic. Look, thanks, Robert, and some great opening remarks. And I love, what you and Jessica have been picking up on, that legacy builders, right? What a word, that we're all kind of legacy builders in what we do. But Paul, I might go to you next, if I may. And look, I've probably gone rogue already, out of order, right? But it's probably what Robert, and just to introduce you as Oricon's Global Sustainability Director and also Market Director for Energy Business. But Robert just there said, where can I make an impact? But we are seeing, engineers very purposeful, right? And it all starts with why. Might be maybe good to give your sort of perspectives on that, of why the important it is, and how does someone like an Oricon or an AECOM or any organization kind of start back there?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Love to, and hi everyone. So yeah, I've certainly resonated with the comments so far. I think of a couple of things about engineers and consultants and climate change. But the strongest one for me, when I look at this particular challenge, probably the number one challenge for us as a species, is that at its core, it is a massively technical challenge. So whether you're talking about mitigation, so basically transitioning where the world gets its energy from, or whether you're talking adaptation and resilience, either way, at the core of those two things are massive set of technical options and pathways. And of course, there's economics and social and other impacts, but more than many other aspects of sustainability, climate change in particular is a very technical question. And so in terms of why should anyone listen to an engineer, to me, this is one space where it makes abundant sense and why engineers should have a voice and should indeed be actually acting as engineers, as advisors, rather than just saying, well, I'll wait and see what the client asks for and then I'll design that thing and someone can construct it. But instead for us to say, hang on, this is our chance to actually try and accelerate change, to drive things in a more positive direction, and really to help our clients and other stakeholders explore what's possible. So I think to be in this space, you have to be an optimist, and I certainly am. So while there is a massive task ahead of us, I feel particularly positive looking over the last couple of years. I think, there's some really interesting papers looking at how the massive shake-up that the COVID pandemic gave to the world has actually allowed sustainability as a topic to get a lot more traction, because for many of us, the idea that things that we thought couldn't be changed, or this is how we have to live, or this is how we have to work, a lot of that got flipped on its head globally. And so then we sort of expanded that thinking to go, well, we could change that much, maybe we could change where we get our energy from, or how we do this, or whether we have to travel for that. So for me, there's a really strong imperative there for engineers to play that part. And as I said, to be seeing the engineer as an advisor rather than just always as the designer is really key. So I think that's probably the key thing for me on this. And the other thing I'd quickly say about our own organisations is, the charter talks about how we tackle the things like the emissions footprint of our own businesses. The relative scale of that footprint of all of our firms is pretty small compared to the projects we do. But I think the credibility and authenticity that comes from getting our own houses in order while we're trying to actually help much bigger industries decarbonise is super important. And I think for us, again, when you look at our firms, how do we succeed? It's all about talent attraction and retention. And I don't see too many engineers who aren't looking for a way to work and contribute in this space. So I think, again, for us to say, well, let's get our firms to be more sustainable, but most importantly, let's bring more sustainable outcomes to our projects. So for me, I think it's great. It's really interesting to see the response to the first quiz there. They're interested but don't know where to start as the dominant answer. I think there's a great opportunity for us there, because there is just so much work for us to point those people at. And I think for all of us leading in this space to figure out, well, how do we do that? How do we quickly grab that interest and passion that people have and make sure they're pointed at these topics? I'll probably pause myself there, Tracy.
Thank you, Paul. And on my go, just picking up on that, you used the word optimistic, and I'm now going to go to Anders, because Anders, I've got to know you over the last couple of years through the Sustainable Development Committee, and I believe you're a true optimistic to a certain point of what you have. And I know you're here representing tonight as CEO of the Federation of the Swedish Innovation Company. What Paul said there, that look at it is a really true massive technical challenge at the end of the day, but you have the word innovation on your screen. What is the role of innovation in all of this as well? And I know before we're talking about, you mentioned research and development, maybe it'd be great if you kind of, throw in some opening remarks around that too.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Absolutely. But let me just start with the question that you introduced everything with, and people actually answering. I don't know where to start, but I think we should emphasize our important role in this, because we are involved, whether we like it or not, and we are making impact, bad or good. And the thing is, how can we actually use this to make a better impact and create greater values in what we deliver? And I think we can all agree on that there are values that we actually appreciate. I mean, we appreciate clean water, we appreciate clean air, we appreciate good functionality, and we appreciate low energy use, or actually a good life. And I think those are the values that we need to have visibility for, to be able to prove that we deliver quality in our sector. When we look at how can we contribute better, we say now, it's not a scientific number, but we say about 50% of the technology that we're going to need in the future, we already have. but maybe 50% is something that we have to develop and innovate and create new solutions for. So to do that, we need also to build an ecosystem that actually gives incentives for companies, for individuals to develop and to think and to develop new solutions, and to have that creativity or the drive to actually, can we solve these problems or these challenges in a different way? And I think that's a very important part of tackling the climate change. I think everybody knows the backsides of climate change, and that will create work also, but our goal is to deliver something that actually delivers better for the climate and delivers better for people on this earth. And I think that is being in the center of these core or in the core of these issues is actually something that can make the sector and the companies proud, that we are the ones that can make change, and we just have to grab or grasp that opportunity that we have. And I think, it's a core of engineering, I would say.
Thank you, Anders, for that. Sudhir, I'll now go to you, and maybe picking up on that opening poll question, right? Because I do see a lot of people in chat are from India, Nepal, Kenya, Ethiopia, and things like that. And I think when we were talking before, right, in terms of developing countries and that kind of first thing, how do we support, how do we truly hope, there's a lot of people on this call where we're probably a little bit more advanced with some of the stuff, but what are you seeing from India? What are you seeing for developing countries? Where do we kind of start there to truly kind of support a lot of the issues which and the challenges that you're faced with there?
Thank you, Tracy. I think it's very true that the poll results were exactly true for India and most of the developing countries. Many people talk about pollution and air pollution and all these environmental changes. We are all facing problems due to climate change, floods and landslides, and everything going bad. But people don't know what to do. And least of them, engineers are only talking about it, but they don't know how to start and what to do. India, the large investment in the infrastructure sector is from the government. Now it is the government also has to play a strong role in combating these or bringing with new ideas and solutions to decarbonize all the construction. And we use a lot of concrete in all the bridges, roads, highways, and metros. Metros are mostly made, above ground. So that means a lot of concrete. And some things are happening. We recently had a seminar on decarbonization of steel bridges, and Mr. Hedde, who led that webinar, we have CEI has appointed him as a climate warrior, and we are now asking all of the companies to appoint a climate warrior in their role, so that we can make an action plan what to do and what not to do. I also addressed the jam session general body meeting of FIDIC Asia Pacific, and I told them about the climate charter and the great job that FIDIC has done. And I also wrote to them and also told them that they should also appoint, each MA should appoint a climate warrior, so that we can all combine and decide what to do in doing these things. But we need to train the trainers, and that is very important, which I have been mentioned to Robert when I was part of his committee, and he is doing a great job, and I really like the way he gets things done. So I would say that FIDIC has to take a proactive role in finding climate experts, and then giving the training to the trainers of each MAs, so that they can also train their people and do that. In India, the public sector is not still concerned about climate, but the World Bank and ADB are asking for a name of the climate expert when they see proposals. So I think it's a good start. It will happen slowly with the other companies and government departments also. And we in CEI are making an effort to interact with them, like Bureau of Indian Standards and CPWD, which is the Central Public Works Department, which made all the specifications for civil works. So hopefully things will start. We are in a bad phase. Everybody knows something should be done, but they don't know what to do and how to do. So I think, Robert, I would suggest Tracy and both of you to come up with the action plan. And my plan is also to organize webinar just for FIDIC Asia Pacific members to again tell them about the charter. Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Sudhir, and I think some really great points there. I love that comment around climate warriors, right? And we know, and also the trainers perspective, but we know there's an evolution and a continuation of what we need to do and awareness of the charter. But not only that, and then part of this conversation is that how do we stimulate and start showcasing some of the stuff? And I do remember a quote in FIDIC that in Geneva, when some of us were fortunate to be there, that knowledge is global, and that we have to keep deeply sort of connected and collaborate on this, right? So that's the only way that we're going to truly be able to address these issues together. Jessica, I might go back to you, and I just remind people on chat, please do post any questions, because if not, I'm going to have to dig deep some shape of managing this. So please feel the need that use your chat if there is any questions. And there's no such thing as a bad or poor question. Everything goes, right, even if it's just a kind of a comment or a thought or something like that. So please do send some things through. But Jessica, it was something that actually Sudhir touched on. We know that our government do play a key role, right? But also, I think we touched on it, the voice of the younger generation, the voice of future engineers, very strong when we're together in FIDIC. How do you think, how do we as an industry, and how do we really, through maybe like emerging leaders and things like that, how do we very much shape the needed policy around it? And maybe you can touch on probably some of the work that you're doing or seeing happening around that.
Thanks for that, Tracy. So I think it's actually, there's a few things that's happening currently, but also, as Sudhir talked about, that there's lots of things that we've identified a need for, but that we're looking at the best way in which to deliver. So one of the key events that's coming up in November is COP27. And some of the work that we're doing has always been about how we can get to the same table as the policymakers in the various countries to be able to shape the narrative around climate awareness, but particularly how it relates to the built environment. So we're working with WIFIO on a side event that's focusing on looking at utilizing the expertise of youth to bridge the science and policy divide to improve access to finance. Now, there were lots of conversations that we've had previously talking about how we expect climate finance to be deployed and the need for sustainable solutions. But the engagement of young engineers and scientists and youth in that lawmaker space is actually not really, it's not seen and it's not really felt. So this particular grouping that we're working with WIFIO on is really key, because it gets us to the table with policymakers. So that's something that we should look out for in through a FIDIC event announcement shortly. But there's also other engagements that happen. So in terms of the work that we're doing with WWF, for instance, and the involvement in understanding some of the needs around training, I think that's a key area that we're looking at. As well. And I'll talk a little bit about the work that we're doing is not just related to looking at people who are already in the industry, because the pipeline of talent that's coming into our sector really does play a key role. So that outreach and advocacy, not just at the level of firms and what firms are doing for their employees and for their projects and all of that, but also just looking a little bit higher up in terms of higher education and how we create that enabling environment there.
Thanks, Jessica. And Robert, I might continue on that theme about, Jessica touched on, a lot of work going in, and particularly with FIDIC and some of the partnerships around that side of it. At COP, I know you were at COP, with interest last year at COP 26, which was, one of, it was not nearly that lingering for COP 26 to happen, right? Because of COVID and everyone kind of went up to Glasgow. And in some way, there was kind of a sense of disappointment nearly afterwards. And I know you're heading into Egypt with Idris and FIDIC are having a presence up of COP 27. I suppose, what do you think the sense of the mood of the room and all of that is really going to be at COP27? And again, what should we be drawing and taking, as a collective industry in relation to that?
Thanks, Tracy. Well, I think it draws on a few of the threads that we've heard in this conversation. One, Anders mentioned, I think 50% of technologies that we need to decarbonize are already there. I heard someone from Siemens the other day saying 80% of technologies we need are already there. So there's clearly some debate. Clearly, we have a lot of technologies ready to deploy to decarbonize, and there's clearly some range there in terms of what's permissible in different markets, and in terms of costs, I think as well, will be a key factor there in terms of cost of deployment. But I think what I would say is that with the theme of COP27 being implementation, there is going to be a lot more hunger from the engineering community and our colleagues in other sectors on how to implement, coming back to that early poll question. So I think for me, what would be a great outcome from COP27 would be much more collaboration on capacity building within the businesses and the sectors that are involved in infrastructure development. And I think industry can play a key leading role there. If you reflect on our journey at AECOM, we're science-based net zero, and our targets validated back to our previous speaker's point on we need to walk the talk, and it's much more compelling if we've been through this journey ourselves. And there's a huge amount of work that we're going to need to engage our supply chain at AECOM on reducing their emissions in order for us to meet our own targets. And part of that's going to be about capacity building, training, understanding what the pathways are to decarbonize. And that's reflected in the fact that a couple of years ago, a year ago, we took on an individual to actually lead our global ESG and sustainability training, because there is so many different programs and initiatives that need to be drawn across the company to build up even further the capability. And so, I've often talked about this, Tracy, is that drawing on that capacity and capability, I think FIDIC can be a great convener and conduit for training and capacity building projects and programs that are already out there. So, one idea, let's throw it out into the webinar. If an AECOM and an Oricon and a MOTMAC each donated one of our internal training programs on decarbonizing assets, or design pathways for decarbonizing infrastructure asset types, we've heard bridges, we've heard about different types of assets. Now, that would actually be a significant contribution and a collaboration that would draw together a lot of learning, because I think you've talked about knowledge management and really drawing on this knowledgeable expertise. If we can get, for example, the Sustainability Leadership Council at AECOM's leaders to, each perhaps commit to contribute one training program that could be globalized, then back to Sudhir's point, we then have FIDIC, playing its role as a global convener of engineering expertise and drawing on that massive amount of technical knowledge that we have, but it's all located in individual, hubs and spots around the world. How can we get that out there fast to follow through on the promise of COP27, which is implementation. So I think that's my piece. It's about doing that connectivity on capacity building and capability and pooling our knowledge management resources, so that next time you run that poll, you don't have most of the people saying, I don't know where to start. Actually, they would have some key handrails and anchors to get started on decarbonising their engineering and infrastructure designs.
Robert, I think you're kind of giving a great call of arms to everyone on this panel, right? You know, and companies like ourselves to kind of truly put our sleeves up and get involved. And I think we're all in kind of unison agreement. Interesting, there's a comment here on the chat from VJ to say that I feel FIDIC might like to introduce some exclusive clause and climate charter with emphasis on the need to go for a carbon neutral approach to infra development and using construction material and practices that are pro net zero, and possibly the employer might consider some bonus clause to particular conditions to complement the clause referred above. I volunteer to write out a suitable draft of the clause and seek suggestions to refine and enhance the contents. VJ, so VJ will probably take you up on your offer. We were keen for anyone to kind of get involved with many of these sort of things. But Paul, I might just head back to you, just really what Robert's kind of picking up there. Yes, about the capacity and capability, the training, things like that. But one of the things that, you know, there's a lot of sectors outside of our sector that we can kind of truly draw, right, and build the knowledge and the experiences and the learnings, because sometimes I think, and I'm speaking from a New Zealand perspective, we're not very, I know Anders is very highly innovative, but we tend to try and reinvent the wheel quite a lot, and we don't tend to look outside of our industry and other sectors in relation to kind of taking some of those innovations and lessons and things like that. So look, I was just going to ask you, are there any sectors we can learn from who are ahead of the game, and what are the challenges and you know, the trends and changes with respect to sustainability that we're seeing with regards to that we can learn from?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I think there's a couple of ways I'd like to talk about that. I mean, one is in terms of ways in which I think we as engineers need to shift our skills and our focus. There's a couple of themes. One of them is around doing a lot more work around scenario planning and scenario modelling. So that's both in terms of decarbonisation pathways and physical impacts, because that's the way we're going to have to think about design. But the other one that's more relevant to your question is actually about becoming systems thinkers rather than designers of specific assets. And so, you know, when I think about some of what Robert was talking about then and the panel discussion so far, there's one of the real revelations to me over the last few years in this space is when you're deep in sustainability and climate change, some things become obvious. And one of them is that, you know, obviously emissions are everyone's problem. And so if we're focusing on, say, civil infrastructure, there's a lot of focus on embodied carbon. But that embodied carbon represents someone else's scope 1 and 2 emissions. So how much are we thinking when we're in our large organisations that are across multi-sectors, how much are we thinking about whether the owner of those scope 1 and 2 emissions are trying to decarbonise? Are we engaging with them? So think of the steelmaker, or think of the OEM who provides the construction equipment. Are they trying to decarbonise? Are we dialed into that? Are we trying to push procurement decisions towards those suppliers? Because often what I find engineers, as you say, we tend to stay in our swimming lanes. And so someone will say, I'm a buildings engineer and I'm a tunnel engineer. My background's energy, so I've been living the energy transition for some decades now in renewables, but sustainability has pulled me into a whole lot of other sectors, and that's really opened my eyes in that regard. And I might surprise a few when I say this, but I think one sector to look towards at the moment, at least in the Australian context, is the resource industry, the mining sector. And the reason they've gone so hard on decarbonisation is because they're all listed companies, and there's massive global pressure from the investment community to show that they're actually going to have a business that exists in a decarbonised economy. It's one thing to look at their commodities and say, are you producing copper and nickel and lithium and things that we need in the future rather than fossil fuel? But the other one to say is, are you decarbonising your operations? So they've actually pushed much further into things like, you know, heavy equipment, heavy transport, the sectors we haven't broadly decarbonised yet. So we've been doing a lot of work with some of those tier 1 miners, and I could see readily that a lot of those learnings around things like heavy vehicles will go straight into the construction industry. So for me, I think these are some of the themes I'd love all of us as engineers to be thinking more of everything we do as part of a massive system. I mean, ultimately, the ultimate system being the planet that we're on and the atmospheric system that we're trying to undamage, or at least get back into a manageable level. But it's about, yeah, constantly trying to test that and pull ourselves back from our frame of reference of the singular asset that we're looking at. I guess that's my immediate thoughts on that one, Tracy.
Well, thanks, Wally. We know that from a system perspective, where we can drive that scalability across, right, rather than always going back down to our sort of swimming lanes again and things. Anders, I might go back to you because there is a question here from Lorenzo, because I think between yourself and Robin, you know, that number about 60% or 80% of the technology is there, but Lorenzo has asked a question around, could you please make some examples of these technologies for decarbonisation? So maybe drawing on some of the stuff that you're doing up in the Nordic region or something like that, just maybe an example of two of where you're seeing some of those technologies coming through.
Yeah, I can touch on that, and it doesn't matter what number it is. It could be 1090, and that's not the point. I think you just have to work with the number and see that there is a potential in the innovation sector. If I would, you can say that there is front runners in some areas. There's some in the production of materials in the Nordic countries, and in Sweden at the moment we are talking about fossil-free steel. Okay, everybody would be happy and they'll be waiting for that. And we're also looking at how can we produce fossil-free concrete. But the thing is, we can't wait for these type of solutions to deliver, to be there or to be available and keep doing things like we used to. Because we have to also think about how do we construct something? How do we design different things? What kind of materials do we use? Do we look into the different options we have? What can we do with wood, or what can we do with the resources that we have locally and other? Because if we just wait for somebody to come up with the solution, so we can keep on doing the same thing as we did yesterday, but it will be decarbonized. That would not be a good development. So I think it's very important to actually look at the picture. So I think Paul had a very good point. We have to be looking at the system that we're delivering, and also, you know, for the construction or the product or whatever we develop, and the use of that and the life cycle is a very important part. And of course, everybody knows during the Corona pandemic, everybody knows that, well, we solved some meetings. Instead of traveling, we exchanged that for these type of meetings, digital meetings. Well, that was a different type of solution. And it's an innovation in some way that somebody found out that we actually don't have to go every time to a physical place. And all of these things are there all the time. I know there's some high technology solutions at the moment. Of course, we measure the use of energy in all houses all the time, every minute. And of course, we can use that information to actually develop high technology solutions so we actually can even out the need of energy at every second of the day. But not all solutions are also high technology solutions. When you come into a project today, you also look back on basic physics. You go back to maybe I don't know the English word for it, but it's a heavy constructions that actually can store energy. Or you can look in how do you construct a bridge? Do you use an arch, or do you have these square things where you have to overcome because of the bad solution you choose? You need to use more steel and more concrete. So actually, you can go back to some basic solutions that actually are better if you just accept that. And the engineering sector is the one that's going to actually say that if we don't follow the regulations, we actually do this solution instead. It is a better solution for everyone. So I think there's lots of things to contribute with in lots of different areas with green solutions or different types of designs, and everybody has some type of knowledge in how we can make that movement. And it doesn't have to be high-tech, because I think people think, okay, an innovation needs to be high-tech, but it doesn't have to be high-tech. It just have to be a different approach on a common problem based on physical laws or basic knowledge. So I think you have to look in all these different types of areas to find a new way to do things and change the traditional way to do things.
Brilliant, thank you, Anders. Sudhir, I might go back to you, and then look, I am going to start drawing. There is now several questions and comments coming through on the chat, which is fantastic. I can see you all on the screen. Not everyone, obviously, everyone online can't, right? So you can put up your hand, and I'll be able to kind of go, all right, direct it in that sort of way. But Sudhir, this is specifically not necessarily for you, but it is a comment coming in from India, and it says, in India, perhaps everywhere else in construction sector, the carbon footprint, especially from cradle to construction, is around 30%. while the rest of the 70% can be attributed to embodied energy. The 30% of embodied carbon can be brought down to carbon neutral by 2070 by circular economy model, but the rest 70% has to come from replacing energy source to renewable energy source. This is the biggest challenge, I feel, not only in India, but across the globe. So it's just really a passing comment, you know, that someone is looking for. I don't know if anyone's there, if you want to pass a comment on that, or anyone else feels they would like to quickly.
Actually, it is true. In India, we are using about 70% of power is from fossil fuel. And we are slowly changing to the new renewable energy, and a big impact is there. We will go for the plan is to have 450 gigawatts of electricity from renewable energy by 2030. And India is also drawing up a plan of connecting India to Europe for the Solar One. We call it Solar One, where France is a big partner. And we are trying to even transmit electricity from one place to the other for solar energy. But this will take time. I mean, we have to use fossil fuel for a number of years. We have no alternative. We don't have nuclear. We have very small nuclear and very small hydro. So our dependence on fossil fuel remain. It is true that we cannot do away with concrete and steel because we need them. Need those badly, but we can, as Robert said, we should organize experts to talk about decarbonization, and I think FIDIC might invite or make a panel of experts on different subjects to talk about the decarbonization on different areas of construction or infrastructure. But I think the challenge is there, but we have to join hands and, you know, push things, and slowly it will change, very slowly, but it will change.
Thanks, Sudhir. There's a comment here from Mark Shepherd from the UK, from Manchester. Said hi from Positive Planning in Manchester, UK. Really interesting, different perspectives, and so encouraging to see this collaborative approach. A number of people have mentioned training. We have found that this is an essential first step in engaging leadership and whole teams, changing mindsets and improving understanding. So it's just a comment, and then Mark, if there is something that you'd like to send us, you know, please do, because again, to your point, Robert, around that capacity and capability and things like that, you know, I think we're keen to draw from where a lot of this, we don't reinvent the wheel, right? There's probably a lot of great material out there that we just need to probably to kind of take our hands on that. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask now in relation to Paul. Sorry, you have your hand up.
I just want to respond to that comment because I think it's a good one to highlight, and I guess just share some of the learnings and observations I've got from, I guess, you know, really trying to build out our sustainability and climate change practice over a few years now, and that is it's really important for engineers and consultants in general to realise that most of the skills and training you already have are what you need to make a difference in this space. You know, we've gone out and sought some really deep specialists in climate science and a few other things, but most of the people we've got working on topics like decarbonisation are people who've come out of some conventional engineering training, and so they've learned a lot. But they've learned it by doing it. You know, they've had to say, okay, well, I have to figure out a decarbonisation pathway for this business or this asset, and off they go, and they figure it out like any other feasibility study or option study. And so I really want people, you know, particularly younger engineers, to know that, you know, they're not going to have to go back and study another 3 or 4 years at university to be able to play in this space. They've already got most of the skills, and they will learn things as they're doing. A lot of the stuff that we're starting to do now, there isn't a precedent for it, therefore there isn't someone who's done it for 30 years. So it actually creates a great opportunity for people who are super passionate to say, well, I want to learn more about that, I want to get into that space. And yeah, don't think that there's some whole other category of experts who are going to solve this for us. It's very much, it's for engineers.
Sorry, Robert and Jessica, I see proper hands up. They official hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to support Paul there, because I totally agree, and I think a lot of the work that we need to do is giving our engineer colleagues and friends just some extra tools and approaches and knowledge platforms to dig in and make sense of it. That, you know, the mindset we already have, of course. It's just there's some new tools and kind of some new carbon language, if you like, you know, coefficients and factors and things like that for folks that might not have been trained up in that way earlier in their careers to just get handles around. So there's plenty of tools and approaches out there to help with that. So yeah, that was the point I wanted to make.
And Jessica, do you want to add to that too?
Yeah, just two things to add on that. So I think with regard to how we prompt younger engineers and graduates in our business to be able to start thinking differently is that it's certainly not just academia's responsibility to be able to arm students and fresh intake into our industry with a way of thinking. But what we need to be able to do is to create that partnership. So most universities have advisory boards, for instance, and it should be industry that's advising how curricula should change or be supplemented to be able to bring out the best when we get into practicing in industry, so that we then generate professionals who are socially aware and also open to holistic solutions. So I think it's not an issue that we need to teach people how to be able to do this, because as we said, the tools are available. It's really being able to create this enabling environment where there is two-way conversations, and also to not inhibit new thinking, because we know that we've got all the technology available right now to be able to solve a lot of our problems, but it's being able to create that mindset where you're able to adopt the tools and then put it into practice, because that's really where we fall short. And I think that that's really key for us to be able to have those advocacy movements, but then also improve on our community-based initiatives, because we keep things at a really high, almost academic level, that it's inaccessible to projects, especially if that's not the imperative right now.
Fantastic, Jessica. And look, we're getting into the flow now. I see, Robert, you have your hand back up, and then Tony after you.
I wanted to make then, but my mind went blank at the wrong moment. So I wanted to continue with the training piece and just say that there's one area that is growing increasingly in importance, that perhaps the tools and approaches aren't widely known and developed, and that is a reflection of FIDIC's new alliance with World Wildlife Fund for Nature, WWF, and that's around nature-based solutions to some of our infrastructure challenges. And I think Jessica actually pointed to this in her opening remarks, that we have got a workflow underway now between FIDIC and WWF, looking at developing a playbook, which would be for our engineering community to understand what nature-based solutions are appropriate for enhancing biodiversity and nature positive impacts on the infrastructure designs that are created, but also the additional co-benefits that go alongside that, to some of Paul's earlier comments on building in adaptation and resilience and having a systems approach. I think that also, deliver significant co-benefits for society as well, in terms of not getting flooded, having cleaner drinking water, having a cooler environment where you've got heat exposure risks and that kind of thing. So that is one area that I think there's quite a lot of work to do actually in developing a sort of practice playbook and a capability and competency in that. And that's one of the things that we're trying to address through this new partnership between FIDIC and WWF over the next 6 to 12 months or so. And so look out for some of the early efforts as a result of that.
Thanks, Robert. No, that's really important to mention that, and look at it for everyone on this call. Look out for that, right? There's going to be a lot of I suppose updates, even a call for case studies and things that people on this call can contribute. Tony.
Yeah, just a couple of observations, if I could. The first one is this is just a big project. So let's break it down and deal with it in the pieces that we can deal with. And if we can deal with one of them today and we have to wait 5 years to deal with another one, so be it. But to me, you break this problem down into the pieces that we can, create addressable pieces of work. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think if you get 6 people around a table, all focused on the idea of decarbonising a project, they're moderately intelligent, they're engineers, they're working in your companies, I am absolutely sure we will end up getting direction, ideas, energy, a whole lot of things out of those collaborations, discussions, however you want to call it, that will benefit everybody. And I do believe in sharing knowledge. I think that's absolutely fundamental to global solutions everywhere. So to me, I think we've got all the goods already. Yes, FIDIC can play a very strong role in training, can also play a strong role in, if you like, collecting and sharing case studies, research, etc., and we need to do that. But to me, I would start now, and I would just, this is why I like very much like the charter, is it enables you to sit around and have a conversation with the people in your office about what we're going to do to the next project that we've got. Let's start, let's have a go, let's be courageous. We're not going to get it all right, but let's be courageous and learn as we go, because we don't have a lot of time to sit here and do 5 PhDs over the next 10 years to work out what to do. It's time to act now.
And Tony, that's coming through really strong on the comments on the chat. You know, many comments coming through to say consulting industry needs to demonstrate its capacity and willingness to change. This needs to be supported by well-placed government intervention. Drivers for change has to be the government. A lot of co's put in a great commentary to say lots of great material, research resources and research and draft clauses has been debated, polished and published by the Chancery Lane Project. Don't reinvent the wheel. So, you know, there's lots of stuff that ultimately are out there. And then a lot of things, as consultants, we must help policymakers and government to make better choices. There is a need to work towards changing mindsets of policy leaders and makers. So lots of comments around that everyone, I think, look, we're probably all in slight agreement here, right, to a certain point of everyone on here. Look, there's one thing I might put, and even Tony, this might be, you know, become that you might put a comment on. We have been witnessing a number of initiatives over a past decade by COP, MBDs, governments or associations. However, none of them was apparently fully welcomed or broadly implemented worldwide. Do you believe that FIDIC might be the initiator of an overall recognized process or procedure? And I think we touched on this all before in some shape or form, but this is not new, right? You know, the conversation we're having our sustainability. And I think, Tony, one of the things we talked about in Geneva went from, you know, we've had a great awareness over this over the last 20, 30 years, or even more, right? You know, but we've been talking about this for a while. You know, FIDIC had a sustainable development kind of guidelines for 15 years ago to a certain point, but you know, we talked about now, I think to your point before, this moral obligation of what you have, but that's an interesting point of, you know, there around, you know, are we the, you know, could FIDIC be that initiator, you know, of that global connectivity? Because FIDIC has a reach of what, 12 million engineers around the world as a collective community.
I think,
or Sajir put it as what we're going to be eco warriors or climate warriors, right? So.
I think, look, I think you're right. FIDIC can be that organisation, and it is true that, you know, right now, people like UN, World Economic Forum and so forth have been talking to us because there is no engineering representative, if you like, or representation. There is no intergovernmental panel of engineers dealing with this at the UN level. So FIDIC has a little bit naturally become the focus for some of this work, and it fits in very neatly because we have our FIDIC contracts, we have all our best practice guides and so forth. So we have already got a significant body of information and network and contracting through which we implement projects to, if you like, decarbonize capability into those documents and into those systems. So there is a want to do that. There is certainly a focus and an enthusiasm to do it. We do have to get to direct action, and we do have to get there pretty quickly. The project that was talked about with World Wildlife Fund is a very important part of that. I do happen to believe in measuring things. Some of you know that. And I do believe very strongly in carbon balance sheets. And, you know, I've put my personal point of view on that if we look at the carbon balance sheets of every country at the moment, there would be some with positive balance sheet, some with negative, and some with neutral. We can do the same on projects. We can do the same on a piece of land that we are about to use for an infrastructure project. There are many, many ways we can measure whether a project is carbon neutral or not, and we have to start measuring it, in my personal view, and that will bring a rigor and, if you like, a much stronger engineering focus to what it is we do. And that to me is an important element of this. I'm all for rating systems. They've brought us a long way in the last 20 years, but they are not going to provide the ultimate rigor we need to nail this down to get to a net zero position, in my view. So
any thoughts to Tony's comments, Robert, Paul, anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Tracy, it is government people or policy makers also are aware about the issues, but are we ready to present what we want to do? I am not sure we are ready. I am not sure what Tony is mentioning is right, that FIDIC has a word, people will listen to it, but as a MA, are we ready to go to the government officials and tell them that do this or do that? I'm not very sure. Like in India, if somebody tells CEI to present what the government should change, I think it won't be easy. It will take time for us to make a paper on that. So what should be done and what changes should be brought about.
And what's to do? We're probably in different journeys and different levels of that maturity, right? Really, around the world, right, in many aspects of that, aren't we?
To the point about balance sheets, and I think Sudhir's got a good point in terms of you kind of need to go to government with something that's been worked out for them to have confidence in developing some innovative legislation or regulatory practices around it. But I think we can do stuff before then. I was witnessing a really interesting dialogue with iStruct, the Institution for Structural Engineers in the UK, about which members have committed to quite a few of the major industry engineering consultancies have now committed to some form of decarbonising of engineering asset designs of up to 50% or so by, some are saying 2030, some are coming up with other deadlines. But the primary challenge for these commitments, and I think Motmac, you might comment on this for Motmac as well, Jessica, I think, is the baselining. And I think a lot of work has to be done on the baselining of the project. As you said, Tony, what are you starting with in terms of the project's sort of carbon aspirations, and then how much can you decarbonize as you go through those design stages to draw carbon out of the design process, whether it's through alternative materials, innovative specifications, different structural approaches. And I think that's where there's actually a real appetite to build some momentum over the next months rather than years. I think we'll see quite a lot of activity over the next months on that in terms of establishing baselining techniques that all of our peer group can sort of sign up to as an approach. So I think it's really an exciting area that's moving fast.
Jessica, do you want to pass comment?
Yeah, so just two things. So first, with regard to FIDIC being in the ideal position to be able to champion something, I'm really a fan of what Tony said around starting with where we are, because we're never going to get to a point where we have all the MAs at the same level of reporting and at the same level of readiness to be able to tackle some of the larger conversations at a platform such as COP, for instance, but such as the conversations with World Economic Forum, for instance. It's a great position to start and be the industry voice with regard to where we want to go. And that gives us an opportunity also to set the roadmap, because we've done exactly that with the Climate Charter. And as the Climate Charter and signups obviously start increasing, we get a better and more representative industry voice. But I'm really a fan of starting with exactly where we are. So that's just to Tony's point. And then with regard to what Robert was talking about, with regard to widely available tools, and it's really multifaceted in terms of how we operate within our businesses, but also what we put out into industry to be shared and to be used. So one interesting development recently has been a physical climate risk assessment methodology that Mott has developed with the Coalition for Climate Resilience Investment. And that's freely available. And it also gives us an opportunity to be able to quantify the likely impact of physical climate risks on real assets. Now, those are a starting point that any infrastructure owner, any client, any consultant can pick up and start using. But again, I think that it's really a good place for us to look at how we develop capacity across our industries for anyone to start from where they are, so that they can also set ambitious targets in terms of where they want to go. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Brilliant, thanks, Jessica. Tony, we're going to you. I'm conscious about time because the reality is I convinced everything will be 60 minutes, and I know we have a little bit more time, but I am being pinged on the side that we have some polling questions. I am going to go back to everyone quite quickly, just as a final call of arms in relation to what would be the final call of action that you would kind of, like I said, there's a great chat there. Maybe in some way we can kind of capture some of the thoughts and comments and also web links and things like that, which on the side. But I'd love for you just to have a closing remark, just kind of quickly. We have done 2 polling questions, and then Tony, I will hand back to you to do our final closeout. But Anders, I might start with you first, if I may.
Yes, thank you, Tracy. It's been a very interesting discussion, and I think somebody's touching on that, the different levels we are on, and that we actually have to start from the basics of where we are, actually the small improvements we can make. But I think the main issue that I picked up was that we can actually deliver more than just the design that we are tasked to deliver. We can deliver something with a better functionality or repairability or reusability or upgradability. So there's lots of qualities that we can deliver in our projects that maybe are not asked for at the moment, but they're valued when they're delivered. So they will be asked for in the future. So I think that's something that we need to take with us. And maybe we should just show what we can do, and we should take maybe small steps, but we should be brave and take those small steps and show what we can do. And I think then that way we can change the culture and change, make a climate change action in
Fantastic,
that.
Anders. So Sudhir, building that train. So Anders says, deliver more, deliver better, showcase, small steps, but was it really around culture change? What would you add to the call of arms?
I think by end of this year, we should have 22 climate warriors of Asia Pacific members. I am looking to build that, and also I propose to have one small time webinar with Tracy and Robert and others, Tony, to give a small lecture to all the MAs of FAP. Thank you.
We will make that happen, Sudhir, and I think you have a couple of hundred climate warriors on this call tonight. Paul, building on that.
Yeah, I think there's been some great messages in this conversation. I think Tony made a really important one before about knowledge sharing, and increasingly working in the climate space. So I get that, from our peer organisations, from many of our clients now, really acknowledging that the scale of the task ahead of us can't be achieved in isolation, the way a lot of our sectors and projects, have traditionally operated, and in some of the sectors we're in, where our clients directly compete with each other and would actually treat some knowledge as a commercial advantage. Instead, in this space, we can't operate in that way, or we'll never get there. So knowledge sharing for all of us is something we're going to have to embrace. And I think that the way I would give people comfort with that is the size of this task is so big. No one really needs to hold their cards to their chest and worry they're going to miss out on work. Actually, it's more work than all the engineers on the planet can deliver quickly enough, right? So share the knowledge, get it flying is really the key one for me. And that other message that a lot of what we need, whether it's skills or technologies, a lot of it does exist today. It's about deployment. And so again, we don't have to wait for perfection before we start. We say, what are the bits we can hit right now? And hit those, and others. Yes, things will improve and more options will appear. Certainly this decade, many options will appear, but there's stuff we can start on today. So that's the other key message from me.
Fantastic. I love that, Paul. Knowledge sharing, but also there's plenty of work, right? And especially talk about the technologies and things that probably is going to come down to the people, right? You know, availability of people and engineers are fundamental to be able to deliver it, right? In relation to Robert. Final passing.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't bring anything additional. I'll just re-emphasize my sort of key takeaways for folks, which is one, you know, the nature positive aspect of this is going to be big going forwards. We've got COP15, which is the nature equivalent of the climate negotiations in Sharm el-Sheikh, happening in Canada before Christmas. I think that's going to set a really interesting agenda around nature positive. And we're crucially placed in that thanks to our innovative partnership with WWF to learn from that. I think some of the initial sort of learning and some of the case study library building will actually have been done by then as well. So we might be in a position sort of come Christmas time to start publishing some early insights and technical guidance from that partnership. So I'm super excited about that. And the other thing I'm going to follow through on, you know, thanks to Paul and others also backing us up on this is, you know, let's get some training content out there and use FIDIC as a channel. And I'm going to follow up on that after this call to sort of see what we can do on that and get some collaboration going in terms of our training modules, seeing what can be made publicly accessible. So
Thanks, Robert, a personal commitment there. Thank you for that. And then Jessica, final word from you.
I think that we've talked a lot about what our businesses can do, what we can do as MAs, but I think it's really about what we can do as individuals, that it shouldn't just be about what we're paid to do, either as a consulting appointment or as a salary from your employer. It's really about developing a personal, a professional, almost like an ethical ethos toward climate, and also our commitment to self-learning. I think that we mustn't keep kicking the can down the road, that there's never a better place than here and never a better time than now for us to even improve our awareness and our ability to apply these things even by 1%.
Oh, Jessica, thank you for that. And that kind of really is a wonderful end. I'd love to thank my panelists, and look at, I should have never doubted ourselves that we could fill 90 minutes, and now I'm closing us off very quickly. Look at, I might go to the 2 polling questions, and then Tony will hand back to you. So next polling question is, what do you need to, so we heard some of this, right? But what do you need help with to get you to be more involved in addressing climate and sustainable challenges? Is it guides and case studies? Is it collaboration? Is it training? Or is it everything is kind of perfectly wonderful? We'll just see what comes out there. And Robert, you know, I think we'll use a lot of some of the aspects that's come in the chat and what you talked about to kind of feed into our program a little bit, right? You know, that's kind of coming out there. So let's see what comes out there. Is that going to come up? Well, kind of quite split. Okay, guides and case studies, the collaboration and training is all evenly split a little bit. Okay, all right. So across the board. And then I think we have the final question. Is there question 3? Now, this is the call of arms, right? Will you commit to signing up to the FIDIC Climate Charter? 2 things, yes or no. Very disappointed now. This is a, you know, black or white sort of thing. But let's see. Hopefully that we have convinced you in some shape or form. It is really a statement of intent. I know there's things about pledges, but it's like Jessica said, it's a personal commitment. It's a statement of intent of what we all need to do in that. I love that ethical ethos and that self-learning perspective that comes to us. Yay! Look at 100% of kind of who's left in the call. Fantastic. Thank you. And Tony, thank you again. And I'll just hand back to you to close. And thank you to the FIDIC team that sit behind us to have made this run incredibly smooth. So thank you from me and to the panelists. Tony.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And thank you to all our speakers. Tracy, you've chaired what I think has been an excellent and rather informative webinar. You provide us with lots of insights and what we've heard that our industry can do and the role it can play. I guess I'd add one small point that all of our MAs can start talking to their governments about resilience, because the more we suffer the negative impacts of climate change, the more funds are going to be diverted away from decarbonising our climate. So to me, it's really important we also make sure that the infrastructure we already have is made resilient to the events that we've seen recently. The climate change charter that's on your screen there, if I would encourage you all to look at it. I would encourage you to sign up as individuals. I would encourage you to have discussions in your firms and get your firms to sign up as well. It does set out commitments, it does set out intent and actions, and gives you some ideas as to where you might start in terms of eliminating carbon or reducing carbon emissions from our sector. It's been drawn up with a great team around the world with many, many, many people commenting on it. So it is a substantive piece of work in its own right, and I hope would provide you, if you like, with the first step on your journey to becoming a decarbonising engineer, if I can use that phrase. If you haven't signed up already, I certainly encourage you to do so and would welcome you doing that. I'd also, just a bit of advertising, we have the major international contract users conference coming up in London in late November, and I would encourage you all to sign up and register for that. It's certainly an important discussion, and I'm very sure you're going to see discussion with the contract users group about how we do embody decarbonising principles into our contracts. It is a vital issue for us. So thank you once again for all to the speakers for all your contributions, and thank you, Tracy, for chairing it, and all our participants. Very much appreciate your attendance. Hope you've enjoyed the session and got something out of it, and that's goodbye from me. Thank you very much.